This is the Waco Suspension Bridge over the Brazos River in Waco, Texas. So this is actually the oldest suspension bridge in Texas and the oldest surviving suspension bridge west of the Mississippi. It was constructed in 1867 to 1870, and it was used by foot traffic wagons and by cattle herders taking their cattle to market north of here. So I'm currently looking at the northern shore from the southern shore, and you can see the suspension. It's a single span suspension bridge with the tower over there, and you can see in the background the anchor weights that the actual suspension cables are anchored to. The cables were actually constructed by Joseph Roebling, the same guy who constructed the bridge over the Delaware, so the Delaware aqueduct that carried a canal over the Delaware River. I have another video on that, which I published a couple years ago. Here's a view from below the bridge, and you can see how thin the deck of the bridge actually is. You can also see the cross beams which support the deck, and you can see the truss work on the deck which is connected to the cable. So this is sort of a hybrid bridge where there's the suspension cables, but there's also a truss that supports it. There's also some pillars upstream from some abandoned bridge that's been removed. I'm not completely sure what bridge used to be there. And in the background, that's a road bridge. Here's a view of the deck of the bridge, so you can see the trusses to the side, and you can see the suspension cables. So I'm facing north, and that's the north tower of the bridge over there. As I said, this bridge was constructed in 1867 to 1870. And it was constructed by a private organization called the Waco Bridge Company. And they constructed and then made money by charging tolls for people to cross the bridge. I believe that the cost of constructing this bridge was $140,000 in 1867's money. So I have no idea what that would be today, probably millions. But after about 10 years of operating the bridge, the people kind of got fed up with the tolls, so they eventually had the county purchased the bridge from the Waco Bridge Company, and they transferred it to the town of Waco and turned it into a free bridge. So looking behind me, you can see the anchor weights which are used to anchor the cables of the bridge. So those two concrete structures are used to keep the cables in tension. You can also see some bronze statues of cows. As I said, this was used to transfer cattle across the river. Waco is actually a major stopping point along one of the cattle trails, the Christoffel Cattle Trail, which led from Texas up north through Oklahoma, which was then Indian Territory, and into Kansas, where it met up with some of the railroads. And the trail was, of course, used to transfer cattle up north. And here's the view down the side walkway of the bridge. One thing that's interesting is that these trusses were not actually part of the bridge. So the bridge was originally purely a suspension bridge, but when the county took over the bridge, they wanted to strengthen it, so they added these steel trusses and actually widened the bridges, so these pathways on the side were not actually originally there. And here's a view of the abandoned pillars and then the road bridge, which actually in and of itself looks rather old and historic. Now I'm at the center of the bridge. You can see all the other bridges that have been constructed since then. So that second bridge there is the Cotton Belt Railroad Bridge that I took a look at in another video. And then there's a number of different road bridges as well. So I'm looking to the west now. So it'll be downstream. And looking up the side of the bridge, you can actually see up close the cables, so the suspension cables. And you can see it's actually multiple strands of cable that are tied together. And you can see the stays that are used to hold the cable, to connect the cables to the deck of the bridge. And those will be attached to the girders that I showed you before below the bridge. I'm on the northern end of the bridge now, and you can see to the sides of me the giant counterweights that are used to keep the suspension cables in tension. You could also see some placards over there. And what I found interesting was there's actually this marker over here which marks this as part of the Chisholm Trail, which was used, as I stated earlier, by cattle herders to take their cattle from Texas up north into Kansas. And there's some commemorative placards. And in the background there is some buildings from the city of Waco. Here's a shot from under the bridge on the north side. So construction of this bridge was actually extremely difficult because at the time Waco was a rather backwater town and it didn't have any industry to support the construction. So they needed to ship in all the parts for the bridge, and they actually shipped them all in via the port of Houston and up the Brazos River to Bryan via barges. And then from there they actually had to transport all the parts for the bridge via ox carts, which was rather difficult task considering Bryan to Waco is like 70-80 miles, which at the time was a huge distance to be transporting things. And that was actually one of the reasons why the cost of constructing this bridge was so high. I believe it was $140,000 in 1870s money, so no small amount of cash. But they were able to succeed and construct the bridge, and once it was constructed, it was a huge success, and they were actually able to make back the cost of the bridge within the first year of its operation. Under the bridge is actually some old brickwork, so I kind of wonder if this is original and this is the material that the bridge was originally constructed of before it was rebuilt. This does look like 1980s, late 1980s era construction, although there were some modernizations in the early 1910s, so this also could have dated back to then. But this is definitely not part of the recent modernization in the 2000s. I believe it was 2010s or something of that nature. And here is a shot of the sunset from the bridge.